Well, joining us from St. Paul, Minnesota is David Bickings with the Minnesota Green Party. Good morning, Mr. Bickings.
Good morning.
Lots of papers reporting this morning about initial protests this weekend in St. Paul. Here, the Baltimore Sun talking about a protest yesterday, about 250 protesting the Iraq War. What are you expecting today? What's the focus of protests today?
We're expecting much larger numbers today. This is the first day of the Republican National Convention, and it's also the first day kicking off the major protests this week. The Coalition to March on the RNC and Stop the War is the major coalition. It includes groups from around the nation, and they're going to be having a rally at the state capitol at 11 a.m. and a march at 1 p.m. into downtown Minneapolis to the XL Center. We're hoping for 50,000. It's always hard to know ahead of time what to expect.
And our viewers are getting a look at some of the protests from yesterday. Were there any arrests in that protest yesterday?
You know, I couldn't tell you accurately. I'm sorry.
David Bickings, you are with the Minnesota Green Party. Your candidate for president is
Cynthia McKinney.
Cynthia McKinney. And will she make an appearance this week in St. Paul?
We believe she will not be able to make an appearance, but Rosa Clemente, the vice presidential candidate, will be here and speaking today and speaking throughout the week and participating in some of the activities here.
Did the Green Party have a presence at the Democratic convention in Denver?
Yes, I believe both of the candidates were there. Yes, so obviously we are an alternative to both of those parties. So yes, we do want to be present at both of these conventions to present a different outlook on where our country should be going.
This morning's Washington Times writes about some of the planned protests. RNC protesters say massive march at RNC as they go. Organizers of a massive march at the Republican National Convention on Monday say the stage is set for their protest despite the convention's scaled-back activities and a series of law enforcement raids by the groups as attempts to quell their right to free speech. Quote, plans for tomorrow's massive anti-war march are well in hand, said Jess Sunderland, a spokeswoman for the Coalition to March on the RNC and Stop the War. People will not let the RNC gather in St. Paul without a loud and clear response from us. They talk here about law enforcement raids. What are they referring to?
Yes, there has been a series of raids to intimidate activists here in this area. One of the organizing groups, the Republican National Convention Welcoming Committee, has set up what they call a convergence space, a place where people can gather, people can come from out of town and find out what's going on, get something to eat, sort of recover after a large march, have training sessions, educational sessions, and that's in an old meeting hall close to downtown. And it's you know, a perfectly peaceful space, and on Friday night that was raided by police. They burst in. They had guns drawn. They ordered everyone to the ground, face down, handcuffed them behind their back, including a 5-year-old child. It was a total overreaction to, well, it's not an overreaction, it's a reaction to something that didn't require any reaction whatsoever. It's a peaceful space for organizing, and that certainly puts a chilling effect and makes people worry. It's important that we come back and say that we are going to protest anyhow and that we are not going to be deterred by those kinds of actions. Also, some houses were raided the next morning and some people arrested. So they're obviously trying to take some of the people off the street. Most of those arrested are probably going to be in jail until Wednesday. And yeah, it's clearly, throughout this whole process of our organizing the demonstrations, we've been up against the forces of the city governments, of the law, who have been trying to stymie our efforts. They have welcomed the Republican National Convention with open arms, despite all the disruption it causes in our city, and despite the violence that that party espouses. Nevertheless, those of us who protest against that violence are treated as a problem. And this has occurred ever since the beginning. When we first heard about this almost 2 years ago, at first they said that this would be, St. Paul would be, the entire city would be a free speech zone. We now have a free speech zone that's about 2,000 square feet and hemmed in such a way that no one will see it. The march, we had a terrible time getting any permit at all for our large march today. and in the end we got a permit that is certainly unsatisfactory.
We're talking about protests at the Republican convention. David Bickings is our guest with the Minnesota Green Party. Phone lines are open, 202-737-0001 for supporters of Senator McCain. Senator Obama supporters call 202-737-0002, and for independents and all others, 202-628-0205. Our first call, a supporter of Senator Obama from Romulus, Michigan. Michigan, good morning.
Good morning to you. I just wanted to thank the activists for being there this morning. I'm a proud veteran of, and I have both a Combat Liberation Medal and I also have a Combat Action Ribbon. I'm not calling it to promote war. I'm calling it to thank you for your activism, because I'm really, really frightened at these political games that's going on right now with the presidency, this gimmick by John McCain. I'm really frightened at this guy, that he would roll the dice and, think that if I was military at this point in time, sitting in a foxhole somewhere, and they told me somebody like Sarah Palin was maybe my commander in chief over the forces, I would be absolutely frightened. I think this is scary what's happening. So I just think a lot of people would feel that way, and I appreciate your protest, because they're playing. I think we're headed for more war if we get somebody like John McCain and his cheerleader in chief. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate the support, and we're getting support, for our protests from people from both parties, really. We feel that in the Green Party, we certainly feel that the leadership of both of those parties does not represent the many very, very good people who are members of the Democratic or Republican Party, but rather the leadership is controlled by the corporations that dominate our society, dominate with money at these conventions. So, and we see that, the war will go on and other wars will start as long as that is the case. War is very profitable, and war is used to achieve their aims.
A supporter of Senator McCain, Roswell, New Mexico.
Hi, I'd like to make a comment about C-SPAN giving this guy from the Green Party time on the air when I didn't see C-SPAN giving a bunch of time to anybody else complaining about the Democrat convention. But also I'd like to make a comment about the giddiness of the media with this Hurricane Gustav, which is stopping the Republican convention. And I would like to know how you all feel about how the media has decided not to be journalists anymore and decide to just strictly go for Obama, especially NBC News. And I'd like to hear your comments about that.
I'll throw that to our guest, David Bickings.
Well, I think the Republican National Convention is news, and Hurricane Gustav is news. And at this point, frankly, those of us who are organizing the protests feel it's important that we carry out these protests whatever happens with the Republican National Convention. We're here, people have come in from out of town, and they have something to say. And that something doesn't depend upon Dick Cheney and George Bush actually being here. It depends upon the policies that they espouse and continue to espouse, whether the convention is somewhat delayed or not.
Your main focus,
so we are going forward.
Your main focus is the war in Iraq. What other issues are you?
Oh, there are many other issues. The war in Iraq is not our only war. There's a war in Afghanistan. The United States has military bases in approximately 120 countries. Between the wars and those military bases, we're spending a huge amount on the military budget, and I believe both candidates want to actually increase the size of our military permanently. This is not the way for us to go, and it's not the way we can afford. It also comes through in domestic policies.